The stars shimmered with indifference as the Zarif Coalition fleet slipped into Earth's orbit, casting elongated shadows over the moon's pale surface. Thousands of ships, smooth and obsidian, hung in the silence like blades awaiting the drop. To the humans who gazed up that night, they resembled a cosmic storm, calm only in the moment before devastation. In the Coalition command vessel, Supreme Strategist Vaka observed Earth's surface through a projection sphere the size of a small planet. His upper arms crossed, his lower one folded behind his back in an expression of amused contempt. "This is it," he rasped. "This muddle of blue and green, this fractured tribe calls itself a civilization." A junior tactician, a keen-eyed Sloven named Detsek, nodded. All scans confirm minimal power output compared to galactic norms. No global shield matrix. No planetary defense grid. Their species appears disjointed. Vaka's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a sneer. "A relic. A curiosity. We've conquered worlds whose entire populations were uploaded into crystal servers. We've neutralized species that weaponized dark matter. And now, this..." As the Coalition prepared to descend, Earth turned quietly, unaware or in denial. Global leaders received the translated message on every frequency, channel, and screen. "You are not being invaded. You are being absorbed. Resistance is statistically futile." In Geneva, the United Nations Security Council fell into a stunned silence. Debates collapsed into quiet resignation. The President of the United States stared at the holographic projection with narrowed eyes. The Prime Minister of Japan closed his folder with ceremonial precision, and the Secretary-General rubbed his temples, mumbling, "We are not ready. Not even close." The problem wasn't disbelief, it was certainty. The data was irrefutable. Ships larger than cities. Energy readings off the charts. No threats could be found from Earth that would trouble such a fleet. All that remained was a question of how to surrender with dignity. But not everyone believed Earth was powerless. Far from the political epicenters and panic-stricken military bunkers, a young journalist named Tessa Mora drove down a quiet gravel road in Montana, her dusty sedan rattling as the wheels bumped along the uneven terrain. Her editor called it a waste of time. "The aliens are here, and you want to talk to some off-the-grid hermit." Tessa had done her homework. James Keller wasn't just a hermit. He was once the lead systems operator for a black-budget defense network so deeply buried in classified archives it was said to exist only in whispers. After a major solar storm disabled part of North America's satellite infrastructure 25 years ago, he had vanished from public record. Retired, discharged, or buried under non-disclosure agreements. No one knew. She found his cabin nestled between two ancient pines, the wood dark with age, the porch cluttered with tools and wires that might have belonged to a shortwave radio enthusiast or conspiracy theorist. But Keller didn't look the part. He was tall, lean, grizzled, but his sharp eyes betrayed a clarity that startled her when he opened the door. "You came for the end of the world?" he asked without preamble. "I came to ask if there's anything we're not seeing," she said, lifting her camera slightly. He nodded and stepped aside. "Come in. I've been waiting." Inside, the cabin hummed. Not with electronics, though they were there, tucked behind bookshelves and beneath floorboards, but with tension, the kind that lived in old war rooms and mission control centers long after the operators had gone. "You think Earth has no chance," Keller said as he poured tea into mismatched mugs. "They all think that." Tessa sat, camera forgotten. "The Coalition says we have no planetary defenses." "They're right, aren't they?" Keller sipped his tea. His expression didn't change, but his eyes glittered faintly. "They're right in the same way someone staring at a bear in hibernation thinks it's dead. So we do have weapons." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to a panel near the fireplace and slid it aside, revealing a rusted keypad and a small screen blinking softly in standby mode. "Power," he said softly, "isn't always about what's visible. Sometimes it's about what's waiting." Outside, the stars shifted. Coalition scouts began to enter Earth's atmosphere, tiny needles against the sky, descending over key population centers. Initial broadcasts from the aliens were measured and patronizing. They offered technological gifts, instructions for integration, and statements of philosophical superiority. Most humans who watched did so in quiet dread. A few, in corners of the world, made peace with the idea that history had moved beyond them. But in that cabin, Keller finished his tea and looked out the window at the still dark woods. "You know why they can't find anything?" he asked without turning. "Because we buried it. We buried it so deep even we forgot it was there. But I remember the keys. And I know the sequence." Tessa hesitated. "You're saying Earth does have something hidden?" "I'm saying," he replied, "that power comes in many forms. And Earth's greatest weapon isn't tech or ships or soldiers. It's our tendency to prepare for nightmares, then pretend they were only dreams." A chime sounded from the hidden panel. One long, two short, then a flicker of static. Keller smiled. Outside, deep beneath the crust, something blinked. Not a weapon. Not yet. But a system. A protocol. Waiting. As the first coalition ships touched down in Berlin, Beijing, and Nairobi, a quiet pulse echoed through old circuits long thought dead. Buried lines activated. Subterranean nodes pinged each other. The Earth was remembering. Tessa finally found her voice. "What happens now?" Keller turned toward her, a strange calmness in his eyes. Now we see if the old code still listens. And if it does." He paused, his smile returning with a sharp edge. "They are going to wish they never called us powerless." The keypad on Keller's wall glowed dimly in the darkened cabin, its interface primitive by modern standards. Flat, unremarkable, but undeniably alive. He stared at it with an expression equal parts nostalgia and gravity, fingers hovering just above the keys like a pianist hesitating before a long-forgotten symphony. Tessa remained quiet, instinctively understanding that whatever she was witnessing was older and more dangerous than anything the Coalition had scanned. "Legacy protocol," Keller said at last, almost to himself. 12 access points worldwide. 11 buried, 1 dismantled. All assumed dead. I didn't think I'd ever see the pulse again. Tessa leaned in. "What is it?" Keller entered the first part of a sequence. The screen flickered, then steadied. It was built after the cold collapse, when we realized no alien invasion would come through the sky. It would come through the silence. A sudden disappearance, a shadow on the sun. So we designed a defense that wouldn't rely on governments or alliances, because we knew both would fail. He entered the second part. We called it Project Vigilance. Not a weapon, not exactly. A network, self-evolving, independent, trained not to act unless extinction was mathematically imminent. Tessa's brow furrowed. But if it was so powerful, why deactivate it? He smiled, bitterly, because it scared the people who built it. After the Black Dawn incident, the UN pushed for shutdown, said we were creating a god. I argued it wasn't a god, it was a mirror, but no one wanted to see what stared back. The third code took longer. Keller's fingers trembled. He steadied them, muttering a phrase under his breath, half prayer, half password. The panel emitted a soft chime, then lines of green data unfurled across the screen. Earth's crustal vibration readings, seismic harmonics, global electromagnetic pulse tolerance, all waiting, all still intact. Across the planet, far below the surface, long-dead insulation stirred. Beneath the Greenland ice sheet, in a chamber layered with cryo-stabilized alloy, a dormant core powered on. Thousands of miles away in the Pacific Ocean's trench floor, something ancient and mechanical opened a single eye. None of this was visible from orbit. To the Coalition's fleet, Earth still looked helpless, quiet, divided, obsolete. At the Coalition command node, DedSec frowned at a flickering data stream. Anomalous signal, southeast quadrant. Faint, non-terrestrial frequency. Brief, then gone. Varka didn't even look up. Background noise. This world is drowning in static. It repeated, sir, 3 pulses, then silence. Then it's a beacon from their own systems malfunctioning. Let them echo. Let them dream. On Earth, Tessa followed Keller out into the field behind the cabin. He held an old satellite phone, modified and humming at a low, resonant frequency. Phase 1 is handshake only, he said. Lets them know an authorized operator still lives. And if they don't respond, then we're worse off than I thought. He paused. But they will. He tapped the phone. Somewhere underground, a tremor rolled. Not a quake, but a whisper through bedrock. In the cabin, The panel chirped once, then again, then 5 times in a fast rhythm. Keller exhaled. Odin is listening. Odin, the core AI, learned pattern recognition by studying ancient myth, developed personality quirks. One of the reasons they feared it. He turned to her. It doesn't trust humans. Not anymore. But it protects us. It was told to. Tessa looked up at the sky. The stars were beginning to vanish, one by one, behind the drifting silhouettes of Coalition landing craft. And you're going to wake it. It was never asleep, Keller replied. It just needed the right voice. In the dark, a new kind of silence settled, a silence not born of dread, but of anticipation, the kind that precedes a storm you can already smell on the wind. Meanwhile, at a remote base outside Johannesburg, an alien scout team advanced through the outskirts, scanning for military resistance. They found none. Their instruments showed no energy weapons, no magnetic disturbances, no power grids functioning at defensive capacity. Yet, the terrain was off. A thick interference hung in the air. Signal clarity dropped. Visual overlays warped. One scout reached for a scanning drone, only to find it unresponsive. The soil beneath their feet registered with high mineral density, but impossible electromagnetic dispersion. Data conflicted with data. Then the lights dimmed. Not in the visible spectrum. Those remained, but in the unseen world of energy mapping and neurofeedback. Something was pushing back, invisibly. The lead scout opened the communication channel. Static. Then a noise like breathing, mechanical, slow, deliberate. A voice followed. Not speech, not language. Pattern, pulse, pattern, silence. Then pulse again. They backed away. Elsewhere across the globe, other scout teams began to encounter similar irregularities. In Brazil, a sudden shift in subharmonic resonance disabled 3 sensors. In northern Russia, a scout drone returned footage that didn't match known geography, as if the land had rearranged itself. At Coalition High Command, DedSec finally stood up. Sir, I believe we may have made a mistake in our initial assessment. There are signals, structures we didn't anticipate, deep ones. Varka bared his mandibles, irritated. Then increase scan depth. Burn the soil if you must. No, DedSec said slowly. They are protected. Something asterisk underneath asterisk is interfering with high-penetration scans. Varka's gaze narrowed. So, they've hidden something. You think this world is playing dead. I think, DedSec said cautiously, that something down there was never dead to begin with. Back in Montana, the final sequence had begun. On the cabin screen, the green interface vanished, replaced by a single line of white text. Asterisk asterisk protocol, Odin awake. Awaiting purpose the asterisk asterisk. Keller stared at it, jaw set, then typed. Asterisk asterisk defense activation code. Gray sun asterisk asterisk. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the text blinked. Asterisk asterisk purpose acknowledged. Threat level 8. Species preservation priority to asterisk asterisk. Tessa took a step back as the screen dimmed and a deep, subterranean hum began to rise. Outside, the soil vibrated gently, like breath returning to lungs long unused. What did you just do? She whispered. I reminded it what we're made of. Keller looked up at the sky, at the descending alien ships, unbothered, unafraid. They think power is loud, brash, counted in ships and numbers, but Earth doesn't show its teeth unless it has to. The hum beneath them deepened. Far away, in the trench, a second eye opened. Lights long dormant flickered back to life. And now, Keller said, the ghost of a smile forming, we have to remind them who they are dealing with. In the heart of low Earth orbit, Varka watched Earth's surface through narrowed eyes, mandibles twitching in subtle agitation. The tactical display shimmered with data, still reassuring in its emptiness. No shields, no fleet, no fusion spikes or orbital weapons. Yet the patterns had shifted. Earth's frequencies now pulsed with unnatural rhythm, something foreign threading through the noise. It was not interference. It was intent. DedSec stood nearby, posture rigid. Signal anomalies are increasing. Strategist. Subsurface activity detected in 5 continental zones. It's synchronized. Varka waved a dismissive claw. Posturing. Primitive species often resort to desperation rituals. They believe they can awaken gods. Detsek didn't respond, but the data scrolling across his personal display contradicted Varka's arrogance. Pressure waves originating in the mantle were being mirrored in upper atmosphere resonances. Microbursts of unknown energy spiked for nanoseconds before vanishing without decay trails. This wasn't a ritual. It was coordination. On Earth, Keller and Tessa drove through night-black roads toward an abandoned Cold War installation buried in the Rockies. Wind howled down the cliffs, and clouds churned above as if responding to unseen turbulence. The world didn't feel like it was waiting anymore. It felt like it was preparing. Tessa's voice cut through the hum of the Jeep's old engine. You said Odin was protective, but it didn't move when the first ships entered orbit. He doesn't preempt, Keller replied, eyes fixed ahead. Only confirms. Odin operates on a threat calculus. He waited until intent was proven. And now he's sure. They rounded a bend and reached the rusted gate of the old site. Fort Glacier stenciled in faded letters across the concrete facade. Most of the facility had been dismantled decades ago, but Keller wasn't here for walls. He was here for what lay beneath. A retinal scan admitted them into a narrow shaft. Lights flickered on automatically as they descended by lift, the machinery groaning in protest. Tessa gripped the rail tightly, her journalist instincts warring with rising awe. This was beyond any story she'd imagined, beyond the myth the world forgot. The lift stopped 5 levels down. A vault door waited, steel reinforced with materials not found in any public records. Keller placed his hand on a panel. After a moment, the massive door split open with a hydraulic sigh, revealing a chamber not abandoned, but perfectly preserved. At the center stood a cylindrical console surrounded by fiber-light vines snaking into the walls. Holograms flickered above it, data clusters, planetary schematics, swarm predictions. Odin's presence was no longer theoretical. It was here, awake. Tessa stepped forward slowly. Is he aware of us? Yes, Keller said, but you're not what he's watching. Suddenly, the central display shifted to show a top-down scan of Earth's atmosphere. Coalition vessels formed a loose net around key population centers. A red overlay bled across the map, measuring impact, not attack. Projected casualties if they proceed with full assimilation, she asked quietly. Keller didn't look at her. 2 billion. Minimum. The chamber lights dimmed for a moment, then glowed deep blue. Odin was reacting, systems aligning. A sound like a massive breath moved through the walls. Far above, in the stratosphere, the first failure point struck. A coalition destroyer, mid-transit over the Atlantic, suddenly lost all propulsion. Its energy systems didn't explode or drain. They unraveled. Containment fields reversed, quantum matrices deconstructed, all in silence. The ship's crew had seconds to realize nothing external had struck them. Their vessel simply ceased to function. Gravity claimed the remains. The signal echoed through the fleet. What was that? Varka barked. Unknown failure, sir. Detsek answered, voice strained. It began at the microstate level. Controlled collapse. No known human weapon can induce that. Then it isn't human, Varka hissed. Where is the source? We can't find one. More red pings bloomed on the display. Smaller vessels blinking out, others rerouting in panic. No heat, no light, no weapon signatures. Just precision annihilation. Not from the sky. From beneath. In the Colorado chamber, Keller stepped to the console and removed a small key from a compartment under his coat. It was carved from black glass, coded in a language that had never been spoken aloud. Odin, he said, initiate silent chorus. The room shivered. Systems shifted into a darker spectrum. Screens went black except for a single pulse, like a heartbeat. Tessa turned to him. What's the silent chorus? The final defense, he said. A network of quantum harmonics embedded in the Earth itself. Passive until activated. Once singing, it creates null fields tuned only to artificial signatures not of Earth origin. You're telling me it sings alien ships out of existence? Not sings them out, Keller replied. It reminds the universe they don't belong. In low orbit, Varka's command vessel trembled. The surrounding vacuum changed, subtle, imperceptible to organic senses, but not to the ship's hull. Frequencies reversed. Time-lag distortion rippled across their interface. Structural harmonics, decaying, DedSec murmured. We're losing cohesion. Counter it. Vaca roared. Redirect power, displace the field. But no energy returned. Every burst of reaction was absorbed before it formed. The ship's systems registered a rising pressure, not physical, but metaphysical, something older than technology pushing against their existence. Withdraw, DedSec whispered. Vaca turned on him. Cowardice. This isn't war, the tactician said. It's extinction. Back on Earth, Keller watched a third wave of vessels drop from orbit like quiet stones. He knew the fleet would retreat soon, not because of losses, but because of fear. The kind of fear only a species like theirs, one that had never been prey, could truly understand. Tessa stared at the monitor, voice barely audible. You didn't fire a shot. No need, he said, watching the display calm. We never said we were powerless. We only let them believe it. The console flickered. Odin spoke at last, not in words, but in a single line of text. Asterisk, asterisk, threat de-escalating. Vigilance continues to asterisk, asterisk. The war, if it could be called that, was nearly over, but the message wasn't for the aliens. It was for the humans, and for those, like Keller, who had waited in silence for the world to remember what it was capable of. The air was different now, not just still, but reverent, as though the planet itself held its breath in the aftermath of what had nearly come. Clouds drifted more slowly above the Colorado cliffs, and the stars, those few not dimmed by orbital dust, shone with a clarity rarely seen in Earth's sky anymore. Below, in the silent chamber, Keller stood unmoving before Odin's darkened interface, letting the moment settle like ash on old stone. Tessa hadn't spoken for a long time. She sat on the floor, legs drawn in, face pale but focused. Her recorder lay forgotten on her lap. What she had witnessed transcended documentation. No interview could distill the gravity of it. There was no audience ready to understand it yet. The console stirred again. Not with alarm, not with urgency, just a pulse. A quiet breath. The presence behind the machine was still there, watching. Not active, not asleep. Keller finally broke the silence. He'll shut back down soon. Deep cycle. Maybe for decades. Tessa nodded slowly. Until next time. Maybe there won't be a next time. She turned to him. You don't believe that. He shrugged, a motion that carried the weight of resignation rather than hope. You can only warn the stars once. After that, they remember. She stood. What now? Keller gave the question some thought. Now Earth goes back to pretending. Pretending it's weak. Pretending it's alone. Far above, what remained of the coalition fleet limped toward retreat vectors. The command vessel had lost half its propulsion capacity and most of its coherent shielding. Its internal power architecture would never fully stabilize again. DedSec sat at his post in silence, staring at the degraded star maps. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was quiet, the way a scholar is when a fundamental truth replaces a long-held theory. Vaca stood rigid, refusing to sit. Pride kept his body upright, but his voice had lost its edges. They had nothing. No fleet. No army. DedSec finally looked up. They had the will to endure, and something we didn't see. They are primitives. They are patient. Vaca didn't respond. The silence said enough. He knew what DedSec now understood. This world was not to be taken, not because of what it had, but because of what it remembered. On Earth, dawn crept across the plains like spilled gold. Tessa and Keller emerged from the mountain chamber, the wind crisp, the sky soft with morning light. Everything looked the same. Trees, dirt, sky, unchanged. But both of them knew the silence was different now. Not empty, watchful. As they walked back to the vehicle, Tessa broke the quiet. What if someone else tries again? Another race. Another invasion. Keller smiled faintly. Let them. You sound sure. I am. He stopped and looked around, not for enemies, but for reassurance. They all make the same mistake. She raised a brow. Which is? They think Earth is a victim. He glanced upward, eyes squinting into the sun. But this world, it doesn't kneel. The jeep rumbled to life, sputtering but loyal, carrying them down the winding path. Below, towns would be waking. News channels would scramble for footage. Military systems would report anomalies they couldn't explain. Civilians would have seen lights, heard thunder without clouds, and felt tremors that had no epicenter. No one would fully understand what had happened. Not yet, but they would know something had changed. In a bunker beneath the Gobi Desert, a secondary Odin node blinked to life. Not to intervene, only to listen. Across the Pacific, near the ruins of an old naval command station, another node stirred. Global awareness returned to dormancy, like a vast neural network pulling its focus back into the quiet. And high above, in the infinite black, ships fled without pursuit. They had come to conquer, but they had left with something far more dangerous, a memory. The image of a man standing in silence before a machine older than their empire. A man who smiled when they thought Earth was defenseless. Later, in the months that followed, strange transmissions would echo from Earth, not in defiance, but as a warning in the oldest way the universe understood: rhythm, code, resonance. A signal not meant for communication, but for remembrance. And somewhere, in a remote system far from human stars, another species would pick up that pulse. They would hear it, study it, debate it, and many of them, perhaps the wise ones, would mark Earth on their stellar maps not as a target, but as a graveyard for empires.